Come on, James, get aboard. You can't keep the president waiting.
Special plane, lunch at the White House. How come?
The president wants to thank you personally.
Oh, it was nothing, really.
I know that, but he doesn't.
I suppose I'll be able to get a drink here.
I told the stewardess, liquor for 3.
Who are the other 2?
Oh, there are no other 2.
Goodbye, Felix.
So long, James. Good luck.
Thank you, Brigadier.
Good luck.
I'm glad to have you aboard, Mr. Bond.
Well, congratulations on your promotion, Goldfinger. Are you having lunch at the White House, too?
In 2 hours, I shall be in Cuba. And you have interfered with my plans for the last time, Mr. Bond.
It's very dangerous to fire guns in planes. I even had to warn Pussy about it. By the way, where is she?
I will deal with her later. At the moment, she's where she ought to be, at the controls.
What happened? Where's Goldfinger?
Playing his golden harp.
It's no good.
Oh, no, you don't.
Oh.
This is no time to be rescued.
He's tall and he's dark, and like a shark, he looks for trouble. That's why the zeros double. Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He's suave and he's smooth, and he can soothe you like vanilla. The gentleman's a killer, Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Demoiselles and danger have filled the stranger's past. Like a knife, he cuts through life like every day's the last. He's fast and he's cool. He's from the school that loves and leaves him. A pity if it grieves him. Mr. Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bangs, not a fool. And danger have filled the stranger's past. Like a knife, he cuts through life. Like every day's the last. He's fast and he's cool. He's from the school that loves and leaves him. A pity if it grieves him. Mr. Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bangs, not a
Finally, he looked up with the clear grey eyes that demanded absolute loyalty, and which knew, instantly, those that could not deliver it. I seem to recall you used to be interested in motor racing. Done any lately?
A bead of sweat trickled down the side of his face. For a moment, Bond thought of the perimeter track at Foxton Hall. It was a kindergarten compared to this. Briefly, he remembered his interview with M in the office overlooking Regent's Park. Done any racing lately? Well, he had never done anything quite like this. He was definitely in big school now. The flag came down, and at that moment, time disappeared, sucked into itself, as 24 racing cars simultaneously exploded into life with a deafening roar, and Bond found his thoughts being torn between the first gear change, the road surface, the wheels, the steering, the weight transfer, and the possibility of finding a way past the other drivers without causing a pileup at the very start. Part of him wanted to check his rev counter. He should be holding the engine at about half the rev capacity. When the clutch is home, that's when you accelerate. But make sure you avoid wheel spin, and for God's sake, don't break something in transmission. But was he already overdoing it? Surely the needle had already crept past the little red line. He didn't dare look down. His eyes were in front of him, behind him. He was aware of everything around him, everything and nothing. The spectators had disappeared, a vague blur, no heads and no bodies, and God Almighty, he was already on the downhill section with the first hairpin right in front of him and the road surface turning to pave. He wrenched the wheel. No, that was too much. Keep it subtle, and found himself edging past a Porsche and a couple of Coopers. The Maserati was doing half the work for him, and with a lighter load, nothing could hold it back. He'd reached the first corner. He was already silently shouting at himself. Come on, you bastard! You've already been round this a dozen times and you've studied every inch. Find the right line. That's good. As close to the verge as you can. All the diagrams and photographs he had studied in Wiltshire were gone, scattered like leaves in a storm. He was driving by instinct, fighting the centrifugal forces that threatened to push him into oblivion, countering them with a force of adhesion that kept him on the road. It was all in his legs, his stomach, that extraordinary feeling of being one with the car. And God damn it, he was edging ahead. He slipped past two of the Italians in Ferraris. Adios, signori. Now, where was he? And more to the point, where were Lancey Smith and Dimitrov? They had both started ahead of him. He had to find them quickly, and then do what had to be done. He risked a quick glance at the speedometer and cursed as that single microsecond, the lack of attention, caused him to mistime his next move. The car had come off the crest of a hill and he was in the air. He should already have been straightening up, preparing for the next corner. Instead, he came down with a bone-shaking crash and almost lost control. He was doing 120 miles per hour. He didn't need to know that, not if it was going to kill him. Bond only just made it out of the corner. Go in slow, come out fast. It was one of the oldest dictums in the racing book, and he had managed to do the exact opposite. Once again, he screwed himself down into the next curve, touch the brakes, slide, but not too much. Now, more throttle. What's that ahead? A pool of oil. Get round it, you idiot. He did.
Of course, it originated with my brother, Roger, you know. He used to do the same thing. As a matter of fact, before I started racing myself, I often used to walk the course with him. The funny thing about Roger, you know, the day he was killed, he hadn't walked the circuit for some reason or another. I suppose I'm rather superstitious about this. I love the challenge of Monaco. Driving through ordinary streets full out is, to me, what racing is all about. It's a pity it's the only one left of its kind.
The order is still Sarti, Stoddart, Allen, and Barlini. Stoddart can't quite squeeze his BRM past us.
The danger? Well, of course. But you're missing a very important point. I think if any of us really imagined, what it would be like to go into a tree at 150 miles an hour, we would probably never get into the cars at all. None of us. So it has always seemed to me that to do something very dangerous requires a certain absence.
A tight right-hand corner, then a sharp left-hander, then a sudden drop-off, one after another, testing him over and over again. The last section welcomed him with a blind corner followed by a stomach-churning drop that Bond didn't see until the last half second because it was concealed behind a bridge. The planting garden that followed almost did for him altogether. Once again, Bond found himself in the air, and as he came plummeting down into the next switchback, he felt the hideous lurch that told him he had gone into a deadly slide. If he had touched the brakes at that moment, it would all have been over. Somehow he managed to correct himself with his steering and brought the car under control, but it had cost him several seconds, and both Lancy Smith and Dimitrov were out of sight. Bond knew now that he would never have managed to keep up for the entire 22 kilometers. His arm and leg muscles were already aching as he fought to keep each turn under control, and he could feel the blisters on hands and feet. His whole body had been pummeled by the different G-forces, and the constant centrifugal pull made him sick to the stomach. God, these drivers had to be fit to put themselves through this week after week, but he still had his one big advantage over them. They were driving carefully. They had to protect their cars, but Bond didn't care how badly he drove, how much damage he did to his engine in the long term. He was over-revving. He was braking hard and late, overheating the drums. None of it mattered, provided this was over soon. A couple of laps, that was all he needed. Where were they? Yes, just ahead of him. Despite everything, he was managing to keep up. And then the Maserati coughed. Bond felt the sweat on his chest and forehead was suddenly cold against his skin. He couldn't be out of fuel, could he? It was impossible. Had he punished the racing car too much and too quickly? Or had the almost empty tank somehow caused a blockage in the fuel injection system? It coughed a second time. He felt the wheel shudder in his hands. A huge poster flashed past with the words in red paint, "Spree zu erst mit Ford." He had already seen it once, surely to God. Either the Ford Motor Company had paid for 2 identical advertisements, or he had completed an entire circuit and begun another. But that wasn't possible. The record lap time at Nürburgring was 9 minutes and 41 seconds. Surely he'd only been driving for 2 or 3 minutes since the flag had gone down. That was what it felt like. But in fact, it had been much, much longer. He had misjudged everything. What a fool he had been. He could already see himself grinding to a halt, and while he was being refueled, the Russian would take out Lancy Smith. With his concentration momentarily broken, Bond took the next corner in a straight line, putting 2 wheels onto the grass, and for one horrible second, he had no grip at all. But The maneuver saved him a few precious microseconds, and with a new sense of determination, he put the near-empty tank out of his mind and pressed on. Where exactly was he? Green trees and green bushes were rushing past, a green tunnel. There were no barriers, nothing other than a painted line to show the edge of a road. Now he came to a straight which allowed him to rest his arm muscles, to check his oil pressure, water temperature, and revs. Everything ship-shape. He stamped down on the throttle. The Maserati, as light as it could possibly be, surged forward, overtaking another car, and with a huge sense of relief, he saw the pulsating black profile of the Krasny. Somehow, despite everything, he had made it to the very front of the pack. Lancey Smith was in front. Then it was Dimitrov. Then Bond. For a few moments, the three of them were separated from the other racers, if only by a matter of yards. Bond crept into Dimitrov's slipstream and got the benefit of its tow. The two of them were incredibly close. He gritted his teeth. 110 miles per hour. That was 160 feet per second, 32 feet in 1/5 of a second. At this speed, one tiny miscalculation and he would kill both the Russian and himself. Smith would be saved, but not the way he'd planned. Bond saw Dimitrov's hand reach over his shoulder, as if he were adjusting his seatbelt, and the next moment, he was blind. Something had hit him in the face. He felt his goggles break, and at the same time the Maserati swerved left and right, the tires screaming, almost escaping from his control. What had happened? Bond fought with the steering wheel and somehow managed to right himself. He put his hand to his face and felt blood. It was incredible. The Russian had thrown something, stones or grit, and it had been carried by the slipstream and had hit Bond full in the face. His eyesight was partly obscured. One of the lenses was cracked. Dimitrov and Smith had leapt ahead, and Bond knew with a sick feeling that this was where the murder was to take place. It was why the Russian wanted him out of the way. There were no spectators in sight. The track was hemmed in on both sides by thick trees. Inch by inch, Dimitrov was closing in on Smith, the Krasny howling, a black beast out of hell, and Bond had been left behind, running on fumes. He pressed his foot down on the accelerator, hoping there was enough precious juice left in his tank to propel him forward. There was nothing else he could do. The Russian was closing in on Smith, halving the distance between them, ignoring any safety margins, performing exactly the maneuver that Bond had described to M. There could be absolutely no doubt of his intentions. He wasn't going to overtake. He was going to give the other car the fatal nudge that would send it spinning off the road, and Bond was too far to stop him. But then, at the last second, Smith became aware of the Russian creeping up on him. He touched his wheel, skewing over to one side, and Dimitrov found himself too far ahead, out of line. He was forced to reposition himself, and that gave Bond the chance he needed. He pushed down on the throttle, and for one last time, the Maserati responded, leaping forward. This was it. This was the moment. Bond pulled out as if to overtake, and for 2, maybe 3 seconds, he was right next to the Russian, the nose of the Maserati about halfway along the Krasny. Bond saw Dimitrov turn, as if aware of the catastrophe that was about to befall him. It was too late. Bond tugged at the steering wheel so that his car edged over, and suddenly his front left tire was right next to the chassis of the Krasny, inches away from where Dimitrov was sitting. It was actually between the front and the back right tires of the Russian's car. Grimly, Bond pressed down on the brake. His front tire and the Russian's back tire made contact. The whole world was jerked out of his vision. He had never felt anything like it. His own car fishtailed away, and if he hadn't been ready for it, he would have been smashed. He felt his neck and spine being twisted out of shape as different forces wrenched at him, and his eyes seemed to pull back in their sockets, his mouth opening in a rictus grin. He was turning, twisting out of control, and other cars were whipping past him, brightly colored bullets fired from an invisible machine gun, and miraculously none of them had hit him. He heard an almighty bang. His feet were scrabbling at the pedals. He was aware of grass under his tires and the trees looming up. Was he going to hit them? No. Somehow he had come to a halt at the side of the track. His engine stalled. The race was over.
shark. He looks for trouble. That's why the zero's double. Mr. Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bang. He's suave and he's smooth, and he can soothe you like vanilla. The gentleman's a killer. Mr. Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bang.